Strong gusts of wind blew against me. I lowered my head and leaned forward to fight my way home. Grandma was waiting for me on the stairs. Inside, I told Mom and Grandma what Uncle Tian had said. Mom looked even paler. Establishing counter-revolutionary ties and listening to foreign radio? It must be Feng Wenchang who told them, Grandma said slowly. It must be. The radio was his idea, and he's the only one who's come here. Her voice grew indignant. Foreign radio? How could we listen to foreign radio? We haven't had a shortwave radio for 30 years since the Japanese invaded. Fawn's lying. Mother, calm down, Mom patted Grandma feebly. We don't want the neighbors to hear. Don't worry too much. When I feel better, I'll go to the theater and ask. I went out to the kitchen to be alone. It was freezing cold, and there was no food prepared, not even hot water. The frost patterns on the window were as beautiful as always, but I could not appreciate them. Every other New Year's morning, the kitchen would be bustling. Mom and Grandma would be making dumplings and my birthday noodles. We kids would be running in and out in our new clothes. Every guest who came to our house on New Year's Day would also bring me a birthday gift. I always felt the whole country was celebrating my birthday. Today I was 14. I started to write happy birthday on the frosted windows. The melted ice dripped down the window slowly and crookedly like tears. Late that evening, I woke up and saw Grandma on her knees mumbling quietly. May Allah protect my son, I heard her say. Then she wearily climbed into bed. I sat on a bench outside in the conference room of the district office of Mom's store. Nervously, I fiddled with my coat buttons. On our way here, Mom had been so still and quiet that I was frightened too. She had fainted again yesterday. She was really too weak to go out, but still her office had called to insist that she come, and Grandma had insisted that she take me with her. Mom's office was in a building that had been a big house before liberation. The narrow hallway was painted white, but the paint showed some stains. I stared at them. I could not hear what they were saying inside, but I knew it would not be anything good, since they had received Mom so coldly and treated me so brusquely. I could not help thinking of Dad. We had not seen him for days. I pictured him stubbornly refusing to confess. What was he supposed to confess? To Uncle Fawn's visit? Was that a crime? I was frightened. They would probably beat him, I thought. I saw Uncle Fawn's battered face and the terrible images of a still dangling shape, Ming Ming's father. I heard a man's voice raised above the others with the words, your husband. They were talking about Dad. Without thinking, I slid down the bench to hear better. Your refusal to help us is a very bad sign. Your husband's unit would not take such a step without very good evidence, and it is not likely that he could do it without your knowing. Your position is very tenuous, you know. A woman's voice was speaking, and I strained to hear. If you're as stubborn as your husband, we may have to take stronger actions. I'm sure you don't want that any more than we do. I could not hear Mom's reply. I leaned even closer to the door. Mom's voice was only the faintest murmur. The man's voice, even louder than before, was like an assault. Then there's nothing more to say until you decide to be reasonable. I'm sure your husband's unit will resume paying his salary when he confesses, and we will return yours to its former level when you decide to cooperate. I'm sure we will speak again soon. The door banged open, and a cold-faced man strode out. He did not even glance at me. Two women also walked out of the room. One of them looked straight at me and sneered before she turned back to her companion. Mom did not come out. I peeked in the door. She had collapsed on the table. Mom, I shouted in panic as I ran to her. Her eyes were closed tightly, and her forehead was covered with beads of sweat despite the cold weather. How are you feeling, Mom? Do you want some water? I wiped her forehead with my handkerchief and stroked her back gently. Finally, without raising her head, she said weakly, don't worry, I'm all right. Mom sat silently on my bike luggage rack, weak and pale. She bent over my seat and rested her arm on my shoulder. I clenched the handlebar tightly and walked the bike very slowly. I heard the distant whistle of a passing train and wished I could get on it and go far away to a place without struggle meetings, without class status, without confessions. We had not seen or heard from Dad in a week since he had been detained. Mom asked me to take some clothes to him. The Children's Art Theater was on Huashan Road in a neighborhood that hardly seemed part of the city. Before liberation, only the wealthiest had lived there, in grand mansions set back from the street behind sturdy walls. 2 rows of trees stretched their branches toward the sky, reaching across the trolley wires and holding hands with their sisters on the other side, giving the street a huge green parasol in the summertime. I'd always liked visiting Dad's theater. I enjoyed walking on the beautiful street, and I loved poking around inside the building with its fascinating secrets. But today the trees were bare. Not a soul could be seen on the street, and the theater seemed like a dark cave that waited to swallow anyone who dared approach. When I left home, I tried to seem relaxed. I did not want mom and grandma to worry, but inside I was trembling. I did not want to go. But grandma had been married to a landlord and mom was in trouble because of dad. I did not dare imagine what might happen if they went. I stopped outside the office to gather my courage once more. Finally, I tiptoed up to the reception desk. It was tall, almost too tall for me to see over. I raised my head and looked timidly at the receptionist. "What do you want?" he asked without any expression. "I came to see my father, Jiang Shi Reng." I held up the parcel grandma had packed. "Oh, Jiang Shi Ren's daughter." Neither his face nor his voice showed any emotion at all. "You're not allowed to see him. Leave your things here." I hesitated for a second, then I struggled to raise my package to the counter. He emptied it onto the desk and quickly sorted through it. A few clothes, a woolen sweater I had just finished knitting, toothpaste, soap, a towel, and a jar of grandma's fresh beef chili sauce. He put everything back in the bag except the chili sauce. No food is allowed. His cold tone told me no discussion was allowed either. I took the still warm jar in my hands and bit my lip. "Please, can I see my dad? Just for a moment?" "I won't say anything to him, I promise." I said, "No," he snapped. "That's the rule." "What's the matter?" Someone came out of the door behind the desk, a short, thin man with closely cropped hair. I did not know his name, but I had recognized him as the foreman of the scene shop. "This is Jiang Shireng's daughter. She's pestering me to see her father." Jiang Shireng, he narrowed his eyes and looked at me with a calculating expression. His face was so thin that the skin seemed stretched over his cheekbones. His eyes were not large, but they were fierce and penetrating. He frightened me. I stepped back from the desk and turned to go. "All right, follow me." His answer stunned me and astonished the receptionist. I followed close behind him into a hallway, hoping that he would not change his mind. We went up and down and made several turns before we finally reached the dance studio. 3 walls of the huge hall were covered by mirrors. The fourth contained a row of French windows looking out onto the spacious theater grounds below. The man pointed out the window. There was Dad. Even at a distance and in the poor light, I recognized him immediately. He was carrying a large concrete pipe on his shoulder with Uncle Fan and 2 other men. His back was more stooped than I remembered, and he was awkwardly using his hands to take the weight of the pipe off his shoulder. I wiped the tears away from my eyes and pressed my forehead against the window, trying to see more clearly. At least he was still alive. At least he was still able to work. He wasn't lying on the floor, bruised and cut from beatings as Grandma had imagined. But it was cold, and he was wearing only his old coffee-colored jacket. I hoped they would let him wear the new sweater I had brought him. "All right, you've seen your father." The thin man's voice was cold. "Now, I want to have a talk with you." He led me into the small conference room next door and motioned for me to sit down across the table from him. "You saw your father. He's being remolded through labor. We have evidence that he has committed a serious counter-revolutionary crime." He paused and fixed me with his eyes. "But he is very stubborn and refuses to confess. And your mother, she's another despicable thing." "She's not a thing. She's a human being," I wanted to scream, but I knew that I should not provoke him. He could have me arrested. He could never let me see Dad again. He could beat Dad. I stared at the table. "You are different from your parents. You were born and raised in New China. You are a child of Chairman Mao. You can choose your own destiny. You can make a clean break with your parents and follow Chairman Mao and have a bright future, or you can follow your parents and then you will not come to a good end." As he spoke the last phrase, he paused meaningfully after each word. I nodded. I could hardly breathe. All I wanted was to get away from there as fast as I could. "Do you have anything to say?" I shook my head quickly. "You think it over. If you think of something, you can always come to talk to us," he said.